Today on the Tennis Worthy podcast, we have an in-depth interview with one of the legends of the transition to open tennis, but a player who has been somewhat overlooked. Hi there, I'm Patrick McEnroe, president of the International Tennis Hall of Fame, and today's interview is with a Hall of Famer who rubbed shoulders with Billie Jean King and Margaret Court in the 1960s. In fact, when tennis went open in 1968, she, King, and Court were the top three players in women's tennis. She is Ann Jones.
I think in the end of the day, it's ambition that gets you there, determination, if you like. But you don't discover that. Well, at least I didn't discover it at first. It is up to the youngster to find out where they can get to. You have to know them pretty well to give them advice. If they're going to be on the circuit for a long time, they have to actually enjoy it. It's not an easy path. My parents said to me, they said, you'll never, it might be women's tennis because women are much more important in America. They seem to fight their own battles much more. You will never make a success of it in Europe. And we did in the end. It took a while, but we did in the end.
Unlike many of the top players of her era, Ann Jones didn't come from a background of great affluence. But under the tutelage of Dan Maskell, a coach and commentator who also rose from a modest background to become a Hall of Famer, Jones twice won Roland Garros in the amateur era and Wimbledon in the professional era, and later became a highly respected commentator, administrator, and coach for the British National Tennis Association, the LTA. Chris Bowers met up with the straight-talking Jones at her home in Birmingham in central England.
Ann Jones, what do you think it is that makes someone a champion or a Hall of Famer?
I think in the end of the day, it's ambition that gets you there, determination, if you like. But you don't discover that. Well, at least I didn't discover it at first. You have to have some talent, some ball hand-eye coordination, and you have to be able to hit the ball to start off with. So I think most people just start off by playing the sport, and then they maybe get a bit better, and then they get a bit better, and then they start to think, well, maybe I could do so-and-so, and maybe I could do that. And you try those, and then if you're reasonably successful at that, you continue on, I think. But I don't think anyone, I don't know, maybe there are a few, perhaps the Williamses did. Maybe it's different now that the sport is money orientated. I think that possibly is a driving factor. But in my day, we were all amateurs. We played because we loved the game at the end of the day. And we just either got better or we didn't. And if you didn't, you fell by the wayside and you weren't earning any money. So you had to go and get a job, quite honestly. But the ones who were successful used to get invitations and travel around the world. And travel around the world, it's quite a lot of fun.
So what makes someone better? I mean, you must have played in squads where everyone could hit the same forehands and backhands, but some won a lot more than others.
I wish I knew the answer to that, because I had squads, when I worked for the LTA. I've worked for so many people in varying guises at the sport of tennis. And I wish I really did have the answer to that, because we've had so many squads, and let's face it, the UK hasn't been particularly good at developing players. We've struggled and we get criticised because the money is there. And so obviously you're going to get criticised. But finding the right personalities to play the game is not easy.
Do you think money can be a problem in the sense that it takes people's fire away? Because at the same time, we know that you need a certain amount of financial resources to get to base one in tennis.
That you need a lot of financial resources. My daughter's got 4 children, and one plays netball and hockey and cricket, and the other one plays the same sort of thing. And then there's a boy who wants to play soccer and rugby. Now, as a single parent, how does she cope with that? She spends all her time in a car driving the kids around. And can you give enough time to any individual child under those conditions? Because the sport, like everything else in life, it has advanced so much. You have to learn a lot more. You have to know a lot more. You have to be able to develop a lot more, and that takes time. And if you've got 3 or 4 children that you're dividing your time between, it's virtually impossible. And tennis is an individual sport, so it means that the parents have got to take the child and they're there for the weekend. And it's not one weekend, it's every weekend.
So do you think that there is an element of luck involved, in the sense that, I mean, you were an only child, weren't you?
Yes.
Has that played a big part in...
Yes.
Yeah.
Very definitely. And being an only child, you see, I was born to be a table tennis player. That's what my parents wanted. And
your dad was the English national champion.
Well, he was very good. He got, I think, he reached the semis of the World Championships, and there were 2. There was Victor Barner and who was Hungarian, and there was another Hungarian that he couldn't beat. And he was captain then of the Swaziland Cup team, which is England's prestigious team for the World Championships. He was captain when Johnny Leach and Richard Bergman and all that lot played. So, he was very good. And my mother was international standard as well. And my mother really was more of a driving force.
What did you pick up from your mum and your dad in terms of attributes that served you as a table tennis player and a tennis player?
Well, I suppose hand-eye coordination to start off with. But then I was bullied into playing, when I was born in 1938, you see. So the war finished in 1945. And my parents started a table tennis club in a scouts hut of all places, which was a wooden thing with an open fire, with sort of 3 tables in this scouts hut. And I used to go there, and I had to play whether I liked it or not when we got there. And because I was so small, I was made to play. They got trestle tables in this place, and they've sort of stuck 3 or 4 trestle tables, one on top of the other, because otherwise you would, if you were tiny, you would hit the ball up in the air to get it over the net, sort of deal. And I wasn't supposed to do that. I had to learn to hit it forwards properly. So I stood on these trestle tables and played for half an hour. As soon as the half an hour was over, I got a friend just round the corner and I was gone.
It's interesting you use the term bullied. I'm sure that was sort of casual, but then you say I had to play.
Yes.
I mean, these days we're very much aware of not trying to destroy a child's childhood.
Yes.
Do you think that there was undue pressure, and do you resent it?
I think there was undue pressure, and yes, I did resent it, because you don't have, if you're going to play sport, especially as I played 2. I played table tennis in the winter and tennis in the summer, and I was good at school. I wanted an education as well, or they made sure I had an education. So really I had no time to myself whatsoever. I was either playing table tennis in the winter and tennis in the summer and schoolwork. So, when it comes to parties and going out with kids and all that kind of stuff, you don't have that kind of life.
And how do you feel about that now, in retrospect?
In retrospect, it doesn't matter as much, because obviously when you're successful, it's hard to know when a personal ambition takes over. I'm saying I'm bullied. My parents say you will play for an hour, and then if you want to go and play, you go off and do whatever it is you want to do for the rest of the time. I don't know. There does come a point where you win and you enjoy the winning, and you go on to looking for the next win, I suppose. The next, gratification, I think we said.
Win like a drug.
Yes. And I think then your own personal ambition takes over. And once your personal ambition takes over and you do things for your sport, because you want to, as opposed to being told you have to. And that comes, I think, somewhere at about 14. And I think I would say that is probably true, because with the squads that I have tried to help for the LTA, I've noticed that around about 14, 15, the youngsters start to question whether they want to be taken to squad training and whether they want to play tennis, or whether they want, actually, 1 or 2 of them, as I took abroad, didn't want to travel. Well, you can't not travel and play tennis. You've got to travel. So if you don't like it, and you don't like being away from your home and your home surroundings and your friends, then you're not going to be successful.
So do you think there is an element there that if those people who are pushed are not successful, they will resent it for longer in the way maybe you didn't because you have the trophies.
Yes, I had the success, you see, but I think ambition, there are one or two examples, I wouldn't like to use any names, where the youngsters have been pushed, they haven't made the grade, and the family falls apart. Because either the father or the mother is the ambitious one and is the driving force. It doesn't work. The kid's unhappy, the parents are unhappy, and it causes enormous rifts.
Do you feel that your success was part of your dad's ambition, or by having been, you know, he played 25 world championships in table tennis, didn't he? Do you feel that his ambition was satisfied and he was pleased for you, but it wouldn't have mattered?
I think that's true. I think my mother wasn't as talented and she had to work a lot harder for what she got. And I think that her ambition was much stronger than his. But, you know, they had me. They obviously loved me. And I was ill, you see, too, when I was 11. And they thought they were going to lose me. And I think that changed things as well.
Did that change your attitude towards competing?
It changed my attitude towards playing. Because, you know, you're forced to be, as an 11-year-old, you're forced to be in bed for 3 months and not set foot on a floor, which was the way the hospital, you know, the doctors used to treat you in those days.
What did you have?
Nephritis, which is a kidney infection.
Okay.
It's a kidney infection. It can be long-term, but fortunately mine was an infection and it went up and down again. So, you know, as a youngster, you don't want to be contained in.
So how were you different on court or on a table tennis table when you came back?
I was much more enthusiastic.
Right. So was that the threshold you went through that you talk about others going through at 14? It was your motivation after your kidney problems?
Well, there was more motivation, but there wasn't. It didn't take over, I don't think. So I was older. I suppose I'd won a few table tennis things, and then I won Junior Wimbledon a couple of times. And then you realise that there is a path to the top. And it's at that point, I think, where the ambition takes over.
We see a lot of kids these days who are very good at lots of sports, 3 or 4 sports at the age of 10, 11, 12, and then they're forced to choose.
Yeah.
And obviously we focus in the tennis world on the tennis players, the ones who chose tennis and did very well. You stuck with table tennis and lawn tennis until quite late. I mean, you were Wimbledon girls singles champion in 56, and in 57 you got to all 3 finals of the World Table Tennis Championship.
Yes, I played both. I don't know. It's hard to think back now, but I kept both going for a while, and I think in those days the seasons were more defined. You know, to me now, soccer, for instance, which is the be-all and end-all, it seems to me, of everything, starts earlier and finishes later. And therefore, the season, you haven't got time for a summer season, whereas in my day, you could play a winter sport and a summer sport. And I kept them both going for as long as I could.
And the wristiness of table tennis didn't interfere with the fact that you needed a firm wrist for tennis?
Yes, it did. Dan Maskell spent years trying to get rid of the wrist action. And it was unfortunate in a sort of way, because now the rackets are so light that if I would have found the transition very easy. And not only that, I would have been much more effective, because I had the top spins and the back spins that the players use today.
But you used the aluminium racket in the 60s, didn't you?
Steel, yes.
Which was lighter,
but it was lighter.
Had a tiny sweet spot.
Yes, yes, but it was lighter, but it came too late, really. I'd more or less finished by then. But it did add a bit of power to my game, I must admit.
And did that help because it allowed you to keep a certain amount of wristiness?
I suppose. I think it just, at that stage, the wristiness had really gone. So, as I say, Dan was successful in the end. But as you say, they got a very small sweet spot, this racket, and I have such a good eye for the ball. I just did it in the middle, and therefore the racket went through the air quicker. So therefore I gained a bit of pace instead of just being solid and never missing sort of thing. It gave me that extra little bit of pace, which made a difference playing somebody like Billie Dean when we got to get the ball past them.
Tell me a bit about working with Dan Maskell. When did you start working with him? What did he give you, given that he was actually, he was one of the first professionals, although he coached players in the amateur world.
Yes, he worked for the LTA. No, that's possibly wrong. He might have worked for Wimbledon and was borrowed by the LTA. I have a feeling, something like that. But I used to go to Queen's Club on a Tuesday. I used to travel down here from here on the train on Tuesday morning, go to Queen's, play Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday we used to go to Wimbledon and play on those, well, how can I put it? I can't say they're awful courts, can I? Those indoor clay courts that they had there, which you couldn't speak to your part. You couldn't speak to the person you were playing with. You could speak to the person on the court next to you. The acoustics were so extraordinary. And then after the Thursday, I used to catch the train back home.
And what did Dan give you? Apart from getting rid of the wristiness.
Well, I suppose it's 3 days of practice. It was the only indoor courts that existed were in Queen's or Torquay. See, Angela Mortimer was from Plymouth or Torquay, and she used to go to Arthur Roberts down there, and she got these indoor courts. We had no method of playing in the winter.
So what made you become a world beater? I mean, we're talking about 67 to 69. You were one of the top 3 players in the world alongside Billie Jean King and Margaret Court.
Yes.
What allowed you, with such an inauspicious start in terms of facilities compared to what youngsters have today, get to the very top?
I can only say it's a love of the game and a determination and a happiness to practice. I could spend hours on the court practicing and didn't bother me. People would say, why do you spend so long on the practice court? Because I enjoyed it. One of the driving factors was more that I wanted to see the world. Came from a relatively poor background. We don't have holidays like you have these days, package holidays where you can get on a plane and go to Ibiza or somewhere. I wanted to see the world. I wanted to get away from here and be in the sunshine and be happy and enjoy myself. And it's hard to describe today because the top players are so surrounded by a team. The coach, the nutritionist, the massage person, the fitness person. We had nobody, literally.
And did that make
nobody
tougher individuals?
It made us fight for ourselves, and also it made us a compact group. You had to fight to get an invitation. There wasn't a world ranking, so nobody went down the world ranking and said, right, we'll take the top 10 players. You had to go along to the tournament director and say, please, will you invite me to your tournament? And then will you give me an air ticket? And then will you give me somewhere to stay? And you have to go round and ask and be personable and try. And if you wanted, as I did, I wanted to see the Caribbean. I loved the Caribbean circuit. I loved the South African circuit. It was hard being away for 6 or 8 weeks with no telephone. I couldn't afford to phone home. And if you did, you got some operator who said, yes, well, you can book a call in 3 days' time at such and such a time in the day. It's the difference in the technology and the way of life is so incredibly total.
So when your head hit the pillow in some Caribbean hotel, did you feel, oh wow, I'm living the dream, or did you feel, oh heck, I'm a long way from home and can't talk to anybody?
Well, I think it's a bit of both. While you're playing well, probably, or while you're happy, or you do have a great time. So South Africa, we used to go water skiing, and then we found we couldn't play the next day because our shoulders ached. But fortunately, see, in those days, you had 2 or 3 easy days. You'd play the locals the first 2 or 3 days before you started playing the rest of the players who were touring along with you. And we used to have some great fun with barbecues and all sorts of things. And sometimes, you took longer to get to places. If we're going to the Australian Championships, or you'd stop off on the way there a couple of times, and you'd stop off on the way back because you had the time. And when we travelled in a group. You go on the Caribbean circuit, you all travel together, and it's good fun.
So when you look at the players who made it and who didn't, was the difference often those who were able to handle living out of a suitcase and not being in contact with home, as against those who just got seriously fazed by it?
I think it's a very big factor. My tennis game was literally a table tennis game transported onto the tennis court. And I played lots of players my own age who had been coached, had beautiful strokes. But in the end, if I produce a bit of topspin and a bit of backspin, one ball go in the net and the other ball go in the fence. And you say, oh, good. Rub your hands, say thank you very much. It's I don't know. It's a way of looking after yourself, if you like. I suppose being an only child makes you a bit more selfish. So in all circumstances, you've got to look after yourself. You've got to, I don't know, it's hard, but we didn't have anyone to help us. Nobody to train us, nobody to say you need to run around the streets, no, to do a regime, nobody to say that you need to work in the gym, nobody to say that it was trial and error all the time. You tried. And the same with diet. People used to say, well, maybe you're a bit too fat, so you'd try and lose a bit of weight, and then you'd find you could play 2 sets, but you couldn't play 3. And nobody told you that you needed. Tennis it's a difficult game. It needs speed and stamina and lots of other things as well.
So does that mean that the champions in those days, and we'll talk about into the Open era as well, because Entourage didn't take off until at least 10 years into Open tennis. Are they sort of more rounded champions? Because, I mean, today's players, although they have a lot of people around them, when their head hits the pillow at night, they're still on their own. They're still alone with their thoughts.
Yes. Yes, I suppose so. But they do get a lot more. They do get a lot more help to get there. I think they possibly maybe get there quicker. I think it took me till I was 30 to win Wimbledon, and I think it's possible if with a bit more help I could have done so a little bit earlier. But it's life, you get on with life, you get on with your friends, you enjoy Montego Bay, what's not to enjoy? Beautiful sea, lovely food, everybody looking after you. And then you go to some grotty place where they stick you in a hotel, which has happened many a time, on the main street where the trams are going up and down all night and you can't sleep, and then you can't play. Or staying in someone's house where you're in the basement and the kids get up at 6 a.m. and you're playing at night. You can't cope with that.
But you have to cope.
But you have to cope, but you don't. You lose, you see. Okay. Whereas things are more comfortable now for the top players. I'm not talking about the ones who are in the second and third division battling their way up. I think it is tough for them. It's just they've got a similar life to the one we had.
Your most successful Grand Slam was Roland Garros. You won the singles twice. You won 3 women's doubles titles. And it was your first one back in 1961. You said you didn't win Wimbledon until you were 30. You won Roland Garros at 22.
Yes.
Were you more ready on clay? Or?
Oh, yes, very much so. Because table tennis, you there's no volley in table tennis. You have to wait for the ball to bounce. And it took me a long time to change. I could play on clay because I could outlast everybody. I'd be there. When the cows came home, I'd still be there. So clay was much more my surface, and I had to learn really to play on grass and to hit the ball harder instead of, which is where the racket came in, you see, because it made a difference. Because the consistency was always there, and the desire I could stay out there all day, didn't matter. I was well trained, pretty fit, and all that kind of stuff. And I used to annoy my opponents. They used to make more mistakes at the end because they were so fed up with the ball keep coming back all the time.
Did you play much on clay growing up?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, yes, because it.
Those the awful courts of Wimbledon.
Yes, and well, the shale courts that we had here they
were even more slippery than net clay.
Yes, they were pretty difficult to play on. Those the championships of Bournemouth used to drive us all insane because you can't turn. If you're running in one direction, it's so difficult to stop and go back in another direction. And it was windy as hell. It was a terrible tournament. It was nice in many ways. No, it wasn't that bad, but it was nice in many ways. But as far as the playing conditions, it was awful.
So when you went to places like Monte Carlo, Rome and Paris?
Yes, I used to like that, you see, because the ball bounced nicely and you get to Wimbledon and the courts have improved a lot, I think.
How many strokes were you playing in rallies in?
Oh, I can't remember. God, that's...
Oh, to about 40, 50 regularly?
Yes. Oh, yes, probably. I think I played Shirley Bloomer, Shirley Brayshaw. I think I played her for hours. He used to play for about 3 hours because she wouldn't make a mistake, I wouldn't make a mistake, and neither of us would do anything.
And so when you're in a really long rally, I mean, is it the love of tennis that you talked about, the fact that you loved practicing? Is that the same thing? Because most players, when they get to about 20 strokes, they're starting to panic.
Yeah, well, yeah, yes, but the game's changed now. You know, it's much more about hitting winners, doing the angles. Whereas in those days, the rackets were heavy, so you couldn't hit the ball that hard. The balls were heavy, and if it rained, they were even heavier because you didn't get new balls like you do now. So it was a much slower game in those days, and you could outlast people, mentally as well as physically.
So you're on the Grand Slam Roll of Honour, but then in 64, 65, you had a really bad back injury, which kept you off the tour for a while. How did you deal with that, and how did you get back?
Well, I wasn't off the tour that long, I don't think. I had... you're asking me all these questions. Do you realise how long ago this all was? There was some guy, Mr. What was his name? Mr. Button. I can't remember his Christian name. Anyway, he ran 4 golfers, good golfers.
Managed them.
No, he managed them. And he came to Wimbledon and he obviously saw me play. And he said that he could do this, this and this. And he sent me to a Dr. Ebbitson somewhere in London. And he said he will look after you and he will give you a regime to follow. And he did. And he improved, my spine. Because tennis is a one-sided sport. So all your muscles, I'm left-handed, so all the muscles develop on the left side. And the muscles pull the spine. So the spine then has to be relocated. And you have to build up the other side to counteract it. And this was all explained to me, and I was given this program to do, and I went to the health clinic here. Another guy, you see, they all help you when you're amateurs because they know you can't pay anyway. And he said, yes, you can come and use my gym and you can do this and we will supervise. And I'd show him the program. He said, yes, you have to do this. And he'd show me how to use all the equipment.
Equipment, yeah.
And so I built myself up a bit, I suppose, because of that. So I was lucky.
Would you have maybe not suffered from that these days, given the advances in exercises and sports medicine? Because tennis is still a one-sided game.
Yes. I don't know, but you see, the tennis players still get injured. They don't live injury-free, and they have to give more out now, I think, in the way of speed. The legs have to move faster, the arm has to move faster. If you're a natural mover like Roger Federer, it doesn't matter so much because he's always upright. He's always in the right position to hit the ball. Whereas somebody who lumbers around a little bit, who's a different type of athlete, if you like, they find it more difficult because they will be reaching and stretching in less natural ways, I suppose.
You don't think it's a two-handed backhand that has a factor in that?
Yes, I think it does have an effect.
You're having to reach across the front of your body.
Yes, but also you've got further to run because the two-handed backhand, obviously, your reach is shorter, so it does make a difference.
Did you ever have a moment when you thought, I'll never get back? No?
No, it wasn't that bad.
Okay.
No, I did it at Queen's Club, playing in the final of the, the British Indoor Championships. I played Christine in the final, and we played for hours. And it was in the middle of the winter, there was no heating, and they wanted to televise the event, so they cut a big hole in the wall, knocked a big hole in the wall, so they got somewhere for the camera to go. Well, of course, it was drafty, and so, we were hot and sweaty and running around, and eventually the draft didn't do my back any good at all. But
did you finish the match?
Yes, I won the match.
Yeah,
very definitely. I don't know, it was something like 10-8 in the third or something. We played for hours.
But then you were injured afterwards.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I've got a displaced disc in my back. It's been there ever since.
So in '66, you weren't seeded at Wimbledon, even though you just won your second Roland Garros title.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but you see, it was all done by other people's idea as to where you should be seated. And they had that ridiculous system whereby if you were Australian, and there were some pretty good Australians, they had to be in separate quarters. And the same with the British had to be in separate quarters. So, you could earn a seed, if you like, of number 5, and then you'd find you get displaced by somebody because the Australians had all got to be split up and the Americans all had to be split up. And there was only certain places left for the French or the British or anybody else.
Were they split up because of some deal to do with coming across?
No, I don't think so. It was just the way they did the draw in those days.
Okay.
Yes, there was quite a lot of favouritism went on.
Right. Most people would assume that as a Brit you get favouritism at Wimbledon.
Yeah,
you
no,
really didn't.
No, it doesn't work that way.
And you had a massive match against Maria Bueno in the 4th round.
Yeah,
could have been a final.
Yes, I did.
So you win Wimbledon in '69, but in '67 you were runner-up to Billie Jean in the final. In '68 you lost to Billie Jean in the semis. In '69 you come up against her again and you lose the first set.
Yeah.
What allowed you to turn that round?
I'm not sure. I think because I got so fed up with it and exasperated because she played, Billie Jean is a very good grass court player. And being left-handed, she was more difficult for me than a lot of people. She just used to direct the ball on my backhand and then bounce up to the net in true Billie Jean fashion. And with my slice backhand, I found it very hard to manoeuvre past her. I could lob and I could chip. And she always blames me, actually, incidentally, for her bad knees. She said, you used to play the ball so low. She said, I had to get down so much on both sides of my volleys. She said, it wrecked both my knees. And but on the other hand, she was difficult for me to play. And I think in the final, I just got fed up. And I sort of, instead of pushing the ball around, I whacked one or two. And they actually went in. Too much today. Dan spent years trying to teach me the topspin backhand. Years. And I think he was doing the commentary, I think, and he said, "Oh, I say," something like that. And so I managed to turn around at the beginning of the second set. I managed to get a bit on top. And I think she had her problems that year as well with her marriage and varying other things in her life that she was struggling with. Because, for sport, you have to be mentally and physically fit for it.
She's obviously recognised now as one of the great figures, not just in tennis, but, one of the great women of the 20th century. Were you playing a reputation at that stage, or was she just another tennis player? No,
she was just another tennis player. We all got on, as I say, we travelled around. We had to set up women's tennis. It isn't often you take on the men and win. Not very often. And we took on the men, and in the end, we won. And we were all friends. We were friends. I was friends with Billie Jean, and we did a lot afterwards of building the women's game, building Virginia Slims, and she was the leading light, but she couldn't do it on her own. There were the rest of us. We had to do some of the interviews because the only interviews we could get were probably 6 o'clock in the morning or 11 o'clock at night, and they all had to be shared round, and we all did our bit, to build up the circuit.
I mean, when we think of the three at the top of women's tennis in those days, you, Billie Jean and Margaret Court, I mean, three more different characters. Hard to imagine.
Yes, I agree with that, yes.
But you got on perfectly well with each other?
Yes.
And there was the solidarity among all three of you?
Well, no. There was the solidarity between those of us who joined and started Virginia Slims. So, and that was sort of more, and the four of us who joined George McCall's group.
Because you were set to turn professional just before tennis went open in '68.
Yes, we did turn professional before, in '67 or '60. Somewhere there with George McCall.
So you were only a rebel professional for about 6 months.
Yes.
So you were prepared to actually turn your back on.
Well, we had to do something.
You might not have won Wimbledon.
No, that's
you might not have been able to play it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, but Wimbledon was sort of more or less was on our side. I think. I'm sure that Herman David, I think, was in charge at the time, and he didn't like the way that the amateurs were being paid. A lot of a lot of money for those days, a lot of money for the tennis players in those days. You know, a few $100 here and there.
And all under the table.
All under the table to play tennis, and that Wimbledon wanted it open. Not that we thought that they would do it at the time, but it's hard to think back, you know, how it all worked out. But we turned pro. There were the four of us. There was Billie Jean, Rosie, Françoise Durr, and myself. And we played with the men. But I learned a lot out of that. I got a lot out of it. I was a much better player when I'd finished.
Such as?
We played with the men. We practiced with the men. There was Emerson and Roy Emerson, Fred Stolley, Andres Jimeno, Pancho Gonzalez. Pancho spent ages trying to teach Frankie how to serve. It was really quite funny because she had this sort of very funny sort of boop, boop like this, and he spent ages trying to change that. It was quite entertaining. But the men would play with us and talk to us and teach us, and so I learned a lot out of those months. But I suppose in a way I was lucky that Wimbledon decided to open up at that particular point. You're talking about solidarity. The solidarity was between the four of us, and then there was Betty Stover, and a few others joined us, and we did get a bit miffed that because we were sort of separated out. We separated ourselves out, if you like, and Virginia and Margaret were left. And they took advantage of the vacuum that we'd left by sticking with the national associations, which we resented a little bit, I would say.
Was there a sense of revolution? I mean, 68 was a strange year politically because there was riots across Europe. Did you get a sense of we're in the vanguard of establishing women's sport?
I think we felt we were in the vanguard of establishing women's rights within the sport of tennis. And that's how it started. I know what you were saying about Billie Jean. Billie Jean has moved on. She's done a wonderful job for women in lots of different ways. She's acceptable at the White House. She knows Elton John. She knows some really famous people. She is a mover and shaker, as we would say. But at the time, you have to realise we were so pissed off with the national associations because they told us we could only play 180 days abroad. My association, the British Association, the LTA, you know, you can only travel abroad 180 days. And I wanted to play in Houston or somewhere. I was already over there for the Caribbean circuit. I didn't want to come back and play in Bournemouth. If you don't come back and play in Bournemouth, it's our national clay court championships. You won't be selected for the Whiteman Cup. And if you're not selected for the Whiteman Cup, you can't go to the US Open or the American Championships as it was then, because I couldn't afford to pay. So, you know, they ruled us. And you were expected to play in the local against Wales or against Scotland or against Ireland or something, which was fine as long as it fitted into the calendar. But when they wanted you to play the first straight after Wimbledon on Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday, and when you wanted to go to the Welsh Championships, it didn't work out very well. And they objected if we said no, when there was retribution. So we were fed up, and I was fed up with mine. And you can imagine with Billie Jean's, she was totally fed up with the USTA because there was Karen, who she played doubles with, Karen Hans. She wasn't. If you weren't in the top four, you didn't get paid anything to play in the American Championships, and it was more or less the same in Wimbledon. There were some of us who were given what would you call it, money to pay to stay in London, as long as you stayed in the Championships. Once you lost, they didn't pay you anymore. What was it, per diem or something? They called it. And then there were the youngsters like Christine Truman and myself and Sheila Armstrong. We were called the junior or the young players, something or another, so we got a bit of money out of it. But the rest of the players didn't get anything. If you go to a tournament, then it's fine. They will put you up and they will feed you and you play your tennis. But if you can't do that, you can't. How do you get there? For me, when I started, I had to play I wanted to play in varying little tournaments around here, like Moseley and Sutton Coldfield and a few other tournaments, and they would pay you £5 or something or another in a voucher form for winning. So then I thought, well, now I need to go to Bristol because Althea Gibson's at Bristol and I need to play some of these better players. So the money that I won went into the train fare to get to Bristol. So,
You were a real amateur.
Yes, we were. We were total amateurs. And then when you're backtracking really, and I'm going round in circles. But when it came to our fight with the various LTAs, we were fed up with them telling us where we could go, who we could play doubles with. I wanted to play with Renee Skillman. She's South African. I didn't want to play with some British player. But they ruled us. And we always felt that they didn't have that right, but we didn't have any money to take it to court to fight it. We always thought that they were infringing our civil rights.
So when you see the original 9 who signed for $1 in September 1970,
yes,
getting a lot of credit, do you feel that actually the 4 of you who first broke 3 years earlier should actually share that credit?
Yes, I think most of them were there. I was the only one who was missing, and I was missing because I didn't play the American Championships that year.
Well, you were pregnant, weren't you? Or had your first...
No, yes, I was pregnant. That's right. The 1 year I didn't go. I should have done. I was seeded 1 in the American Championships, but I didn't go because I was a bit injured, and also probably I just won Wimbledon. I'd probably had enough. The following year, 1970, I was pregnant and I didn't go. I went to the US Open. I did commentary for the CBS, I think. But I didn't go to Los Angeles, so I wasn't there. So they all did that then. But then I did go to the Virginia Slims thing. The very first one in San Francisco.
Because your husband was the chief executive.
Yes, he looked after, he was put in charge by Gladys. Gladys didn't want to travel. She got Joe Coleman to put the money.
Gladys Hellman, the editor of World Tennis.
To put the money in. And we all arrived in San Francisco. Oh, that's right. We played the Federation Cup in Australia over Christmas. And we all went and Frankie and I, we went to join the Virginia Slims Rebel circuit, if you like, straight from there. It was quite funny, I suppose. And we all arrived there, and this lady, nice lady called Ellen Merlot, she arrived she worked for Philip Morris, and I'm not quite sure she knew what she was doing. We certainly had no idea. We turned up and we sat there. Judy Teggart and Judy Dalton and I was sat there looking at each other, thinking, well, what's going to happen now? Are there any courts here for us to play on? Where's the tournament? It's really quite funny. And I'm not sure Ellen Merlot knew a lot. She was supposed to be in charge. I'm not sure she knew a lot more either. But we all got together, and I think Larry King set the thing, the first 2 tournaments, and he got a sponsor. Funnily enough, it was a British Motor Corporation or British Motor Company or something.
So it's all very in-house because Gladys Heldman asked your husband to be the chief executive.
Yes.
Billie Jean's husband comes in to find sponsors.
Yes.
I suppose that was the necessity of it.
Yeah, well, it was, yes. We were a closed group, and I was going to go anyway, so Pip said he didn't mind looking after the difficulty was moving the court, because we played on this rubberized something or another, and we couldn't they couldn't afford to pay for the whole week indoors. So we had to play outside on cement courts, or what you call them, acrylic courts, for a while. And then we moved indoors and played, I suppose it must have worked enough anyway. And so Larry found, I think he set up the actual courts and the venue and that kind of thing, but I don't know all the ins and outs of it. But Pip was in charge of this court, and of course we played on a Sunday night, and it had to be at the next city on Monday morning. This court, so he had to get somebody to roll it. You had to roll it up. It was in strips. You rolled it up and put it on a truck, and you drove it to the next city. It was quite funny, actually.
So you created the professional spectacle of women's tennis.
Yes,
and within a short time, it's massive. you get the Chris Evert, Martina Navratilova, and then later Steffi Graf and
Yes.
the Williams sisters and all the other big names. Obviously, that becomes a very big achievement that you can be proud of. But today's players have very little privacy. How do you, as somebody who's quite a private person, look at today's world when you see there's very little that they can keep out of the public domain if they're a successful athlete? And has there been some element of you creating a beast that got a bit out of control?
Well, I'm not sure. You see, that I was watching the TV this morning, and this topic was brought up. How little they were talking about TikTok, obviously. How little privacy anyone has. It's not just the tennis players; it is worldwide, countrywide, America, and in here, you have no privacy. You don't have, in my opinion, you don't have freedom of speech anymore, because there is so much that you can't say because it's not PC. And I'm not sure that's it's evolved, and I don't know. I don't really want to get involved in the politics of any of it, but I don't think it matters what kind of individual you are. If you've got an iPhone, everybody knows where you are if they want to know, unless you strictly switch something off.
But we're back to what makes up a champion. And does today's champion have to have more steel to be able to switch off these distractions than perhaps you had in your day?
Well, we did have much more privacy. Probably Wimbledon was the only focal point where people knew you. It didn't matter where you went in London, people knew that you were playing tennis at Wimbledon. You didn't. You had some of it in the American Championships, but the rest of the time we were just tennis players travelled around.
How big was it when you won Wimbledon? How big a rumpus was it?
Oh, it was huge here because because I'm British, I suppose. We had Angela won in '61, and we hadn't had. I suppose we had a nice group when I first started to play. There was Shirley Brayshaw, Pat Ward, Angela Mortimer, Angela Buxton. Christine and I were coming along. So there was a nice British contingent and something for us to cut our teeth on. In other words, if we could beat Shirley Bloomer, we were already sort of in the top 20 in the world type of deal. Whereas now there isn't quite the same challenge for the youngsters. They find that more difficult, but because they've got to go abroad all the time to find the challenges. It's a really you're really in a complicated system here. All I can say is, from a personal point of view, I am delighted that a few people around here recognise me when I walk the dog and that, which is nice. But by and large, I've retired. I've got my little house. I've got my little dog, and I don't venture out into the big wide world anymore. So I'm not fighting all those things. But you do have to battle it. There are times when you feel the press follow you everywhere, and of course all the newspapers. In that time, the press all had a tennis reporter, and they all travelled with us. And
I gather that the Monty Python team in their early years used to sort of regularly quote you and Pip.
Yes, I think they did. But I again, you see, I don't do social media at all. None of it. No Facebook, none of it. And people make remarks. Oh, so-and-so said so-and-so, or you the Coleman balls, which, when you're stuck on television, you've got to say something. You're bound to put your foot in it from time to time, or use the wrong word or something, but I take no notice.
And is it true that the Beatles stopped recording the Abbey Road?
Yes, I heard, yes.
When you were playing the Wimbledon final? Yes,
and the guy who just left this morning, he worked for the BBC, and he was working on something with Roger on The Saint, with Roger Moore at the time, and he said, Roger Moore, exactly the same thing. He says he wants to see the tennis, and he stopped all the filming. And the Beatles did, and I know it's all a long time ago.
It was big.
It was big, yes. It was big. Yes.
You were the first left-hander to win the women's.
I know that is amazing, but I suppose it was because people weren't allowed to be left-handed in those days.
Did you ever have any? Did anyone try to get you to play right-handed?
No, I was when I was very small. I was ambidextrous. I could do with both. And my parents said to me, "That's no good. You will never learn. You will be confused all your life. You are to choose one hand or the other now." So I chose the left one.
In 1985, you were inducted into the International Tennis Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
What did that mean to you?
Oh, it was lovely. I took a nice trip to Newport. I took my son with me, and we had a great time. But it's lovely. What can I say? I'm not the type of person that really cares about fame and that. I'm quite happy for it to be over there. But it is an honour. You have to admit that it's an honour, and you have to be pleased that sort of thing happens. But it's minor. It's much more about Billie Jean and I going to Wimbledon to see Brian Burnett and say, look, the prize money for the men is 50% more than for the women. Yeah, we didn't just take on and set up Virginia Slims. We tackled all the Grand Slams. Billie Jean flew over, and this is what we said, and Brian Burnett went off and changed it, and we got it from 50%, just the two of us, from 50% to 80%.
So do you think that's your biggest achievement? Or...
No, it's not. But we took that one on. We threatened Australia. Philippe Chatrier he was French tennis president, and he was international.
Yeah, he was the ILTF or ITF president.
Yes, president at the time. And we took on the Australian Championships and told them, no, we're not playing it over Christmas. We won't. The men want to play, they won't move, or you won't move, we're going to move.
Was that when the Women's Australian Open was a different week to the men's?
It was in November, and it was very successful, and the women went there. And it cost the Australian Open equal prize money to get us back. And we threatened the American one. We said, right, we've set it up we're quite happy to move to Meadowbank, thank you very much. And, they were amazed. They shook their heads lots of times and said, no, it's not happening. And we got money out of them. And it was a lot that went on. And then eventually, when I was tour director for the WTA, European tour director, and we went from, where did we play first? Can't remember. We ended up in Perugia. We split the Italian, and we split the German. Their national championships, we split them. Said, right, we're having our own. Thank you very much. And we went to Perugia, but it bloody rained all the time. It absolutely tipped, year after year, it tipped with rain. Anyway, Philippe came over and he said, we'd made a big announcement that instead of the Grand Slams, that it was going to be Wimbledon, the American Championships, and the Virginia Slims finals. And Australia and the French could run away. We weren't interested. Vic come trotting over. He said, what am I going to do about this? He said, how am I going to build my French championships? And I said, well, you better invite the players. I said, they're all here in Perugia. It's pouring with rain. They've got nothing to do. You might as well take them out to dinner. So he takes them out to dinner. And I said, you better take the mothers as well, because the mothers rule the roost, you know. And then Mrs. Austin came and Mrs. Everett came, and there were one or two American youngsters on the up. They actually didn't make it, but they were on the up, and there were their parents, and everybody went, and we all had a nice dinner somewhere, a very posh dinner. And Philippe said, right, what do I do to make my French championships much more popular amongst you women? And somebody turned around and said, you put your money where your mouth is. So Philippe had to do that. So he did.
So do you think of your contribution to tennis as much as a contributor as it is as a player? Oh,
yes, very much so. Yeah, I worked really hard for the WTA, building up the European circuit. My parents said to me, they said, you'll never, it might be women's tennis because women are much more important in America. They seem to fight their own battles much more. You will never make a success of it in Europe. And we did in the end. It took a while, but we did in the end.
You talk there about the mothers being very important, especially to women players. I'm sure it's the same with young men players as well. So what advice are you comfortable giving both young players and their parents who are setting out in the tennis world today?
I don't think I would. I think that it is up to the youngster to find out where they can get to. And you can You have to know them pretty well to give them advice. As I say, one or two of the youngsters didn't want to travel, and I tried gently to point it out to them that they couldn't make the top if they didn't want to travel. And others, the parents were, when push came to shove, were more interested in the education than they were in the youngster maybe making it in the tennis world, maybe not. It was too insecure. Only the top few made it at all. And that was another conflict, which I suppose all these conflicts still exist. The travelling around and all of it, they all still exist. But there is more cash there for help, I suppose. But it's not an easy path.
But given the rewards that there are in today's tennis, is there a danger that people end up doing it for the wrong reasons rather than that love that you talked about earlier?
I doubt it. I think that if they're going to be on the circuit for a long time, they have to actually enjoy it. You can't. I don't think you can live a life under the spotlight like that without enjoying some facets of it. And you're not maybe going to enjoy all of it, but you enjoy a lot of the facets of it.
And do you feel that today's tennis, which I know you don't follow anything like as much as you used to, but do you feel that today's tennis is in a good place, or are you worried that it is actually getting too commercial and asking too much of players?
Well, I think it's got its place in the world. You know, the soccer players make a fortune, the pop stars make a fortune, but you have to be right. You have to get right to the top. And the problem, I think, for people taking up the sport is that the difference between being down here and up there is huge. And it's not a team sport where a soccer is a team sport. You can go and play in varying leagues and fight your way up. And you might realise, or other people are going to advise you quite quickly. But there is a place for you if you're not that good. There's something to do. Whereas in tennis, I think it's very, very difficult to play if you're not that good.
You can't be the bread and butter player, which you can in team sports.
Yes, I think it's very hard to do that.
Anne Jones, thank you so much for sharing your memories with us.
Pleasure.
The very straight-talking Anne Jones in conversation with Chris Bowers. I guess anyone who can interrupt the Beatles recording their Abbey Road album has to be a big hitter. And we're fortunate that she devoted her considerable energies to working for gender equality in the tennis world. And you probably didn't know that Anne isn't actually her name. Her parents called her Adrienne, but she thought that was too fussy, so she shortened it to Anne. Truly one of life's originals. You've been listening to the Tennis Worthy Podcast, brought to you by the International Tennis Hall of Fame. You can find many more interviews just like this, plus podcasts focusing on specific stories and ideas. Just go to tennisfame.com/podcast and scroll down the list. I'm Patrick McEnroe. Thanks for listening. So long.